Welcome to the Reel to Reel podcast, where the stories behind the board go on record. I'm your host, Bruce Hensal, and we're here to give you an insider's look into the music industry. I'm joined by my co-host, Drigo Garcia-Salas from the Melrose Center audio team, and this month's guests, Joe Vitale and Michael Braunstein. Please welcome Joe Vitale and Michael Braunstein. Hey, guys.
Hey, how you doing?
Bruce, Michael B. here. How you doing?
Good. So, Joe, I don't know that we need to have an introduction to you. A world-famous drummer, composer, author, an all-around good guy.
Well, I'll take all that. Thank you. Appreciate that.
Good.
Yeah, I'll second that, Bruce.
Okay. Well, it sounds like we have a quorum then.
I'm in good company.
Michael, you want to give us a little brief introduction to you?
Hi, my name is Michael Braunstein. I know these guys mostly from the record plant in Los Angeles. Grew up in Omaha, got into audio and video, and moved to Los Angeles in 1974. Started at the record plant. And I met Joe sometime around 1976 when I started working with Stephen Stills. I recorded a bunch of records, and then I moved out of Los Angeles in 1994 back to my hometown of Omaha, where I live now. How's
Great.
that?
That's good,
Sounds
man.
good.
You got in when it was good, and you got out when it's good.
It's about right.
You had a good run there. You had a good 20-year run.
Yeah.
Good timing, too. Well, my first introduction, or the first time I recall Joe Vitale, I believe it was 1968, and it was a child's concert at Chippewa Lake Park. Now, most people don't know that Joe was a teen idol back in the day.
I still am I?
Yeah,
A teen
I
idol?
was going to say, where was the cutoff date on that?
Back in what was that magazine for the teen idols? 16?
16, yeah, 16.
All right, I'm well past that. So okay.
And then the next time I bumped into Joe, I was working for a band called The Measles, and Joe filled in as a drummer, I believe, for Buddy Bennett for a short period of time.
Yep.
And then I left Ohio to go to the Fillmore West in San Francisco. And then from there, I went to work for Stephen Stills. There's going to be a common thread in this whole thing. And I moved to Colorado. And in 1972, my college friend Joe Walsh was forming a band. And lo and behold, who comes to town but Joe Vitale? And I think myself and Patrick Cully picked you up at the airport in the snowstorm and your platform shoes.
Oh yeah.
And
right from Detroit and Ted Nugent.
Wow.
Exactly.
That was a major, what a change, huh?
Well, that's a heavy DNA chain right there.
Yep. And so that would be
the Motor City rocker to the laid back Kent State rocker.
Joe, if you don't mind me asking, can you tell us a little bit about kind of like the beginnings of your drumming? I'm a drummer myself, and I know now pretty much everybody wants to play guitar. And I know how to play guitar, but I'm more a drummer. I started with drums. So what kind of led you to start playing drums, and what was like some of the inspiration behind wanting to play the drums?
Well, that my entire family were musicians, and my father was a musician. All my uncles were musicians, so my dad had a lot of musician friends, and he could tell from me beating the heck out of my mother's pots and pans that's probably I need to be a drummer. So he got a hold of one of his good friends that was a drum teacher, really a great teacher. And it's funny, we're coming from, you guys are in Florida. This all took place in Florida because we were all born in Ohio, and then my father's job moved us to Fort Lauderdale in the 50s. And that's when I started taking lessons when I was 6. Anyway, I took lessons for about 15 years. And one of the funniest things about my lessons is my father was a barber, and he would trade. We grew up pretty poor, and so he would trade haircuts for drum lessons. He would cut my drum teacher's hair, and he would give me lessons for nothing. So it kind of worked out. But that's the way people did things back then. It was really great. And so I studied drums for a long time, and my father was more of a keyboard player and accordion and piano, and so he insisted that I learn piano only because he said, you don't have to play the piano. You just learn the piano. You be the drummer, but learn the piano. And thank God, God bless him for that, because all the writing I've done and arranging and stuff, it's all been because of my piano knowledge. And again, I'm not really much of a piano player, but I do play live once in a while when I double on drums. But that's not my main instrument, but it was a vehicle to write. And he obviously knew what he was talking about. He says, you be a drummer and work hard at that, but you got to learn piano. And I'm so thankful for that, because, even today, 2 weeks ago, I was in a session and somebody was having a struggle with a chord. And so I knew enough about that end of music to suggest a few things, and they used it. And so it's like you play drums and guitar. That's awesome. You should definitely always. It's nice to carry a second instrument in your database, and because it helps writing and you get a whole different view of songs when you know that part of the song other than just the drums, and so it's been really helpful. And then I used it my whole life, my whole career. I've used that knowledge, and it's been really good.
I 100% agree. I play guitar and piano, bass and drums, but I started with drums. So in my band, my guitar player plays a 9-string guitar that's down tuned. So basically, there's a lot of times where he's trying to come up with ideas and stuff, and I'll just kind of tell him, like, just give me the guitar, let me try something. And so we'll kind of mesh together, and then something will come out of it. And then also knowing how the guitar works and just watching him play, that helps music very complicated.
That's exactly right. And you find yourself in a situation where like we're talking about Stephen Stills a lot. We were in the studio a whole bunch, many years, and I don't know the first thing about playing guitar, but he was struggling to look, and he was looking for a part or something he was looking for one time, and I said, "Hey, Stephen, why don't you da da da," whatever I said back then, and he tried to say, "Hey, that's a good idea," and so it's just. It helps in creating music to know other instruments, and you don't have to necessarily. I don't know the first thing about playing guitar, but I understand what's going on that guitar neck, and I can't really play it, but I stuff like that. So it's worked out good. I do the same thing with Joe Walsh. We both agree, and Joe plays piano, and even Joe actually in high school played oboe, when we really didn't have much use for that in rock and roll. but then again, he had a really some foundation in music theory. He music, and today the old Nashville number system and all that. You got to know that to write charts out. It's good to know that stuff. And I would highly recommend to any drummer out there to learn another instrument. And I would also recommend to guitar player and keyboard player, learn a little bit of drums and see what we do before you suggest
Absolutely.
a pattern. That, sometimes it's funny, some guys they always have the same beat. They say, do this beat, right? It's like, there's more beats than that one beat, So
Correct.
anyway, it's pretty funny stuff. Anyway, it's good to hear.
Well, great. Yeah, I mean,
Bruce,
Joe's keep,
Bruce, can I jump in here with the Joe Vitale story that
of
supports
course.
what he just said? Of course, I met Joe as a drummer, but first of all, piano is a percussion instrument, after all, so that's not too far out of line. But I soon came to realize that, almost immediately, that Joe is a songwriter, that he's a song maker. And the way I realized that was recording artists record a whole lot of different ways. Some people come in with charts and say, here's what you play. Some people come in with the rhythm section, say, here's what you guys do. Here's the song. Some recording artists rehearse for weeks and then go in and cut it in a couple, 3 takes. Stephen Stills, during that period of time that Joe was referring to, was very common. A lot of artists come in with a song idea and try to hash it out in the studio. And like Joe was just alluding to, it takes that coalition of musicians to put pieces together. Well, one night in Studio C at the record plant, probably around 1976, like I say, in December or something like that, Joe was out there on his drum platform. And Stephen was struggling. I don't remember the name of the song. Stephen was struggling to get this song down. The whole section was out there, Finnegan on keyboards and Joe, and everybody was struggling. 3-4 hours, take after take after take. And of course, being the engineer who knows everything, I walked out to Joe and said, "Man, I don't know, this is getting tough. Maybe, is there something you can do? Like, I don't know, go to the ride cymbal in the chorus or something." Me telling Joe Vitale or suggesting something to Joe Vitale. And Joe just sort of turned to me from behind the gobos and said, maybe it's not a song. I mean, what do you mean? What do you mean maybe it's not a song? He said, just that. Maybe this is just a collection of riffs and stuff. It's not really a song. Man, that was one of the most enlightening things, to be able to identify something as whether it's a song or just a combination of notes. And I went, wow. And my estimation of Joe, my image of Joe just radically changed right then. This guy's not a drummer. He's a song maker. And he can spot the difference between a bunch of different riffs and something that is actually a song. Man, that was brilliant.
Well, thank you, Michael. I was kind enough to say, man, this sucks. I didn't say that. It's much kinder to say, this isn't a song. You can hear that. It didn't take much to hear. You could hear that. Bruce could hear that. Sometimes you have collections of ideas, like you said, and they don't flow into each other. They have no relationship to the section you just heard. It's a whole new section. It's almost like 3 or 4 songs. And a little later in our conversation, I'll give you quite the opposite of that conversation when and that whole theory when it comes to the song that we did with Joe Walsh called "Life's Been Good." That's a whole that really goes along with what you're saying, but in the opposite direction. So we'll talk about that.
Yeah, I got something to say about that too.
Well, I maybe our listeners aren't quite aware of Joe's songwriting prowess, but he's a co-author of a song on one of the biggest albums ever, Hotel California, and he also co-wrote with Walsh and Passarelli the national anthem of Colorado, Rocky Mountain Way. So I think these are a few tunes that I'm sure our listeners are familiar with, and but what I always told people about Joe was he plays the song. He listens to the singer. He's one of the most complimentary drummers I've ever heard in terms of playing the song. And a lot of drummers, that's not the most important thing to them. It's listen to my chops, and here's what I'm going to do in the ride out. And so I think in terms of that, Joe is world class.
Well, thanks, Bruce. I can thank we need to thank Ringo for that, because when the Beatles came out and we were all about the same age, I was 14 in 64 and I was a musician. I was a drummer already, had a little band. And here comes the Beatles on Ed Sullivan. Completely blew my mind and changed my life. Of course, my father was watching Ed Sullivan with us that night, and he looked at me and he goes, "You're not going to do that." And I said, "Oh, yeah, I'm going to do that." So anyway, but I just love the Beatles. I love everything they did. Ringo and I have become, we're friends. And I studied Ringo and I studied all that music. And he's the guy, when you study a musician and learn the parts that they played on certain records, you really learn how brilliant they were. That's back to the studying keyboards. I spent a year once on keyboards learning every Beach Boys song on keyboards because I idolized Brian Wilson and I had to learn all what he did. And it just improves your own, learning, and it just helps in all areas of music. But with Ringo, I would play along with all the records, and I realized when I worked out Ringo's drum parts that were like, man, these are absolute perfect drum parts for the song. He was a master at playing the song. And he never got flashy, although some of his rhythms they were actually kind of complicated. He made them look simple. But anyway, he never tried to be flashy or outdo the band or any of that. He was the drummer of that band. And I learned that from him. I learned that, wow, it's really good to come up with not just play whatever you want to play, but play what the song needs drum wise. And through all the years of touring, it's really cool to play the drum parts on all the records I recorded, because that's what people remember hearing that. And it's good to have a signature kind of drum part for the songs. And not all songs are like that. Stock rock and roll is stock rock and roll, but there's a lot of songs like complicated parts that you create, and it really makes for the song. And I think Ringo did that brilliantly. When you hear like drum parts like Come Together or Ticket to Ride, some of those drum parts they're just like, a lot of drummers wouldn't just play it like that. If Lennon or McCartney or both would come to you with a song, a lot of drummers wouldn't necessarily play what Ringo played, but he played this brilliant creative part, So I studied him for years. I still study him. And I've got I think 400 Beatles songs on my iTunes, and because of all the different renditions and, live here and just all the studio versions and the outtakes, I have them all. And I just listen to what he did. And I listen to other drummers as well, but we're talking about musical drum, playing to the song. He's the guy. He owns that.
That's very important too. I know for me, I just try to write the most complicated part that I possibly can. But this style of music is also not about trying to compliment. It's just how many notes you can fit into a bar or whatever. But it also, you still have to understand that there's some parts where you can't just be throwing a whole bunch of stuff. Some parts do need to have a little bit of room.
Yeah,
I remember.
Go ahead, Michael.
Well, I was just going to say, I don't know who said it first, but the first person I heard it from was Keltner, when he said, it's as important the notes you don't play as the notes you play.
Keltner. I remember that. And he's Dead on, right on. And and then that goes, there's all kinds of music though. There's all kinds of styles. That doesn't necessarily work with, fusion bands or jazz bands or, even blues bands. Blues bands, it's all about pocket, and you don't ever get too fancy, just as long as there's a deep pocket there. But, and one thing really cool about this Stephen Stills band that was we had all walks of life too. We had Stephen, who was like a down home back porch, acoustic guitar player, an amazing player. And yet he was also a rocker. He hung out with Hendrix a lot. And we had Mike Finnegan, one of the best, if not the best B3 player on the planet. And God rest his soul. And an amazing singer and all the blues and stuff, his background. We had George Chocolate Perry from Miami, Florida, one of the best bass players I'd ever worked with in my life. And, and occasionally we'd have Paul Harris, another amazing keyboard player who played on a million things. And so there was all these guys that came together. Stephen Stills really put together quite a band. And we come from different walks of life, different parts of the country. And it was a beautiful chemistry.
In thinking back now, I think probably the first time that all three of our paths crossed was at the Elton John, Joe Walsh, and Emmylou Harris Dodger Stadium, a remote recording concert. And that was an amazing weekend. Michael, what are your recollections of that weekend?
Oh, I was just about to get up and get my road case and pull out the Elton John backstage pass of Elton John wearing a Dodgers uniform.
Yeah.
My recollection was real simple. I had just gotten to the record plant, and I was really deep into video. And at that time, I had a half-inch Sony recording deck, half-inch reel-to-reel, black and white video. And Kelly Kutera, who was one of the maintenance guys on it, we used the Enactron truck, which is a horrible truck. I hated that thing. John Stronach was engineering, and he was going to record Joe Walsh, who was opening for Elton. And Kelly said, hey, can you videotape this? So I took the camera up on stage, ran a line to my deck back in the Enactron truck, and I still have that video. It's downstairs in the vault. Really interesting. And the next thing I knew that happened after we had set up for Joe Walsh is somebody came into the truck and said, it's off, unplug the microphones. What? We just set up, audience mics out at home plate. What do you mean unplug the microphones? There's 800 feet of cable there, dude. No, you guys can't record. You can't record this. Do you remember this, Joe? Yeah. And so there was some kind of thing going on where John Reed and the Elton's people and long story short, you're going to have to pay to record.
Was it a union thing?
It wasn't a union thing. It was no, you can't record to how much are you going to pay us to record Joe Walsh? It was this is a story that went down as all of us minions were running around. And so I had to take the camera off stage and everything. Next thing I knew, helicopters landing in the parking lot. And Irving walks from the helicopter into Elton John Reed's trailer with a briefcase. He comes out without a briefcase, walks directly over to the Enactron truck and says, plug those mics back in, boys, we're good to go. I'm not sure how much was in the briefcase, but it wasn't party snacks. It was six figures, I'm pretty sure. So we got the recording out of that. Wasn't a union thing.
That was a good gig. I remember. I think didn't they pull us out? The trailer was like right at like second base or something, facing home plate?
No, we were back. The stage was in center field up against the wall.
But didn't they roll it into the infield, near the infield?
Gosh, boy, that's a good question.
Because we would have been pretty far from the. No, yeah, maybe not. Maybe we were sitting
Well,
back.
it was center field.
Yeah,
Because the entire infield was people besides the stands.
right.
They
That,
sold,
yeah.
They sold
It
all
was
that.
it was the first gig at Dodger Stadium
Right.
since the Beatles. The
Wow.
only previous gig at Dodger Stadium, because Dodger Stadium was pretty buttoned up and pretty tight, and the ownership and everything, and so they didn't want don't mess with our infield and stuff. And Elton was big enough, but boy, what a great show! You guys kicked ass.
Yeah, it was good. It was a good show. I remember that. It got, we were having fun because for some reason the stage sound, the sound on the stage was just fantastic. It was huge, and you could hear the reflection back from off the grandstands. Gigantic rock show, and it sounded like it, and we just had the time of our life. It was fun.
Well, that recording that was made there, then that and the show that the same Walsh band played at Santa Monica Civic became Joe's live album, which was the last one he needed to get out of his contract with ABC because he was going to join the Eagles and they were on Elektra, which probably explains Irving's. I mean, I think it was a John Reed power trip.
Could be.
And Irving had the solution because he had to make the record or Joe would never get in the Eagles.
Good,
That was-
good backstory.
You can't argue with a sick mind album.
Exactly.
Perfect.
Oh man! But did you
That was
have
a good
Joe?
record. That was
Joe,
a good
did you have
record.
a hand in any of those album titles? Because those are all of Joe's album titles. Are
No.
just-
No. Now,
man.
Joe, between Joe and Bill Simzik, they would all of a sudden come to the band and say, "Here's the name of our album." We were just like,
Oh.
unbelievable.
Speaking of Simzik, I exchanged emails with him yesterday, and he sends his best wishes to everybody involved. I told him I was going to see you guys today on Zoom.
Oh, beautiful. I spoke with him. I speak with him a lot, and spoke with him a couple of weeks ago, and he's doing good.
What a great guy!
Yeah.
Anybody, any listeners who are listening to this, SZYMCZYK, Bill Simzik. Google this guy and see what he's done. Not the most famous producer in the world, I don't think, but man, oh man.
He's got quite a wall of fame.
Yeah, he indeed was one of my mentors for sure. I got the privilege to sit in a lot of fantastic music.
Yeah, well, you worked on Hotel California, right, Bruce?
I did that. I worked on the Jay Ferguson records, All Alone in the End Zone, with Bill. And that was just an amazing experience all the way around.
Yeah, I think we all learned from him.
I agree.
And he was really generous about it because I always, what EQ are you using on that snare? It sounds great. What EQ is that? A lot of producers, engineers will go, none of your business. But he was always generous with all his ideas and stuff. He said it's not his to own. He just he shared all his knowledge, and wonderful man.
Yeah, one of the perfect examples of that is that on Hotel California, there's only 4 engineers credited, and there's only 2 of us left. It was Alan Blazek, Ed Michel, Bill Simzik, and myself.
Right.
And he gave us all full engineering credit on that, although I was merely an assistant 98% of the time.
He did the same with me on one of these nights. Gave me a full engineer credit, and I thanked him for that yesterday on the email. It was the most generous credit. I don't know. The guy's heart is as big as his talent.
He's the soul pole.
Yeah, he's a soul pole.
Well, now that we're talking about Simzik and his brilliance, why don't you get into that Life of Illusion story you were talking about, Joe?
Not Life of Illusion. That's
Oh,
another story. Life's been good.
life's been good.
But Life of Illusion has got a cool story too. But anyway, life's been good. So we're working at Bayshore, Bill's studio at Coconut Grove, Florida, and we're making Joe's album called "But Seriously, Folks," and another great title. And that's the one with him underneath at the bottom of a swimming pool. That swimming pool was the Coconut Grove Hotel. And the people thought, we were completely insane, and they gathered around to watch that. Anyway, so he came in with this idea, like this Rolling Stones kind of riff, right? And that was supposed to be like a Rolling Stone kind of song. And then Joe loves reggae. And so he went another day. We go dun 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 dun, dun, right, a little reggae thing, right? And then we had this sequencer idea for another song. Anyways, 4 different songs, just ideas, like what Michael was saying when somebody would bring in something to the studio and depend on the people you hired to come up with creative ideas and try to help finish the song. A lot of people do that, right? Well, Joe was doing the same thing. He brought in 4 pieces of music and 4 different song ideas, and we cut them and we laid down the tracks, and they all sounded good, and so it was Friday afternoon, and we were going to take the weekend off, and so Bill said, "I'll see you on Monday." And so we come in on Monday around 11 noon or something, and it's me and Joe and Willie Weeks and Jay Ferguson, and maybe you remember Joey Murcia, rhythm guitar player from Miami? Okay.
Yep.
I believe it was Joey also. So it's all of it. We're the band, right? So Bill says, "Sit your butts down right here." And he hit play, and it was Life's Been Good. And it's like unbelievable what he did with those. Were 4 different songs, and he cut them all together. And Joe sang the song, and people know about that story. It's not like some secret, But the point is, when we're all finished with it and we play it live, it sounds like that's
the way it's supposed to be.
And he heard all those parts that nobody in their right mind would have put those together to make one song, right? I mean, even if it were 2 songs, but he made one song out of all that, and that's he cannot play a note of music or sing, whatever you want to, it's all making records. He's a genius at making records, and he's turned choruses into verses and verses into choruses before somebody comes with a song and they think this is the verse and this is the chorus, and Bill will go, no, this is your chorus, and he was right. He was hardly ever wrong. That's why he was a great producer, and of course that's who you want to produce your record. And he had these great ideas, and we knew we were doing the right thing when we'd look in the control room window, and all 6'4" of him were jumping up and down, dancing like an idiot. We knew we were doing something right because he was having so much fun with it. He loved doing that, and he hardly got frustrated. He was so patient with bands that, struggling through songs, and he said, "We'll get this tomorrow," and he had a deadline for so many takes. After like take 5 or 6, he said, "Next." He said, "We'll get to this tomorrow." He knew when we had burned out a track or a creative idea or whatever. And so, he was that's why they called him Coach, and he was our coach. We were the team and he was the coach. Made a lot of great records with him.
Joe, that was your middle section on the mini moog, wasn't it?
Yeah, I played synth on that middle section. Yeah, that was another song.
Yeah, I mean, you're exactly right.
We threw it all in, the mix, and
Now, whenever that came out, like 78 or something like that.
78.
Yeah, 78. Stephen had said to me in LA, he said, man, let's go up to Sausalito. I got some work to do. And so we went up to Sausalito, the record plant in Sausalito, 2200 Bridgeway. And we're in Studio B. And Stephen said, we got to get Vitale up here. Do you remember coming up to Sausalito in 78? We all went to the Buddy Holly story together.
Right.
The movie over in San Francisco came back to the studio and cut a version of Not Fade Away.
No.
Yeah, we got to do that.
Yeah, but, that was cool.
Before you got to Sausalito, Stephen said, we got to get Vitale up here. And so phone rang. I picked up the phone in Studio B, and they said, Joe Vitale's online. I said, Joe, I just heard that Joe Walsh song, man. You're all over that, right? He said, yeah. And I said, yeah, that middle section, I heard you. Now tell me, how many edits are in that song? Because it was so apparent to anybody who's ever, made records that it's just, well, anybody who's ever listened to music, that it's just a brilliant concoction by songmakers. Brilliant.
Yeah, and the Eagles are out still playing it today. We play it on every Joe tour, and the Eagles play it on every Eagles tour.
Great song. Great song.
Yep.
Well, let's jump into 1978 and the studio fire at the record plant, which burnt down Studio C. And guess who was in there recording earlier in the evening before the room caught on fire? Our old friend Stephen Stills. And then after they rebuilt Studio C, Michael became a history-making engineer for doing the first digital multi-track in Studio C at the record plant. You want to talk about that a little bit, Michael?
Oh, sure, Bruce. February 7th, 1979. And 3M had just come out with the 3M digital mastering multi-track. And Chris Stone, the owner of the record plant, Stephen was pretty much the highest profile recording artist at the record plant at that time. So Stone said, would you guys like to be the guinea pigs on this? And so we kind of set it up. And Stephen and I were running 3M 79 analog machines at 30 IPS plus 6 over 250 nanowebers per meter, which is really hot on Ampex 456 tape. And so we said, well, let's hook these two things up and run them in sync, the digital machine versus the analog. And so we showed up, and it was quite, it was an ordeal to synchronize two completely different technologies so that we could listen to the songs completely synchronized and flip with an A/B switch to listen digital, analog. And so Stephen put together a nice little band. I can name them: Ben Schultz on bass and Jan Uvina on drums. Just, the way Stephen used to do stuff. Hey, you, and pulled together a team. And we went in and we recorded on digital and on analog at the same time. And the first playback, imagine the worst sounding digital machine you've ever heard. Brittle, no kind of sustain, no kind of attack, no kind of transience. But boy, oh boy, there was no tape hiss. No tape hiss. Oh boy. I mean, it's obviously built by engineers who had no concept of what things are supposed to sound like, but they were looking for their own set of parameters. So we stayed in there all night. And we recorded, 3 or 4 songs. Jerry Tolman was on guitar, Joe.
Yeah.
He played guitar. Finnegan was there. And bass was Ben Schultz, like I said. Oh, and Joe Lala. Joe was on percussion.
Yeah.
And so
was that a 24-track digital?
No, what was it? It was
32.
32.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure.
Yeah. The 3M was 32.
Yeah. And weird ass remote that you'd look at and go, wow, what are those? Oh, those are called LEDs. They'd light up. No headroom at all. I mean, if you hit the headroom, pow, it's gone. Your audio signal is gone. Unforgiving. Digital is unforgiving. Stephen, Billboard was there. They took some pictures. There was a tiny little article, but it was the beginning of the end of analog. 3 years later, 2 years later, 1981, the first CD came out.
Right.
Cheaper to make, and you could charge more money for it.
But wasn't it? That was a 3M 32-track. But
yeah.
I think it was Sony who perfected the digital with the 24 and 48 track.
Yeah, the 33-24 was a really good machine.
They had a 24 and a 48
yes.
track, because we did some of Neil Young's stuff was on a 48 track digital.
Yeah.
And what's hilarious is those things were like what, $150,000 or something. You can buy them for like $3,000 now.
and yet Namtek's 2-track analog machine will run you like 10.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
ATR 100 or 102.
Yeah. Stephen probably hated to this very day, he still has and uses his own. He has 2-inch machines.
Yeah.
And he doesn't. He loves tape. And I totally understand why. Who doesn't? During
a playback, he held up. Steve. Anybody who knows Stephen, he loves to sketch.
Yeah.
He loves to write things out. He loves to draw. I've got a charcoal sketch of me downstairs that he did up in Sausalito during that period of time we were talking about earlier. And during a playback of that digital session, with all the people hanging out in Studio C, you remember Studio C's control room could handle an army. Yeah. And he took a yellow legal pad and wrote, "Scientists, you've failed." He just held it up. It was playing back loud. So he just held it up and spun around on the chair. "Scientists, you failed." Because you gotta cut him some slack. It was the first multi-track digital, so
it was pretty incredible technology, but it wasn't. It was just technology. It wasn't musical yet.
Yeah, the sampling rate was like, I don't even remember what the sampling.
Oh, that's right. It was like weird. It was it wasn't
like 48. I think it was 48. 48.
It was I thought it was some weird sampling rate, unlike today.
I don't think it was even that high, Michael.
Yeah,
right. No, right. I don't think so.
That's where they wound up.
The Nyquist theorem makes sure that I would like to do one of these things with you, Bruce, sometime as the guest, and Joe and I as the interviewer. Because I want to hear more stuff about you and Devo and the Starwood and garbage bags and all that shit. But anyway, enough of that. That was the digital session. It was February 7th, 1979.
I wasn't there, but I remember Stephen for years telling me all about that night. Yeah. And he would go off on it, and he loved telling that story and how much he hated it. But you know what? I got to hand it to him. He was right. And, you got to, I'm all for technology and moving on and all that, but there's some things you cannot replace some things. And, they're doing a pretty good job today of all the digital. It's not bad. But any of us that have grown up with analog, we certainly know what that was like, and I miss it, especially as a drummer. I miss it.
I always used to say that the system we used before was analog. It was continuously variable curve.
Yeah.
Okay. And digital is the estimation of a curve. It's just plain calculus. It does it in stair steps. It just can never be exactly what it is. And the main thing I used to say to people is that our ears are analog. They're not digital. and so we're putting something in between. The previous system was entirely analog.
Yeah.
Entirely. So analog to analog to analog to mechanical, electrical to mechanical, blah, blah, blah.
But here we are, brought to each other by digital signal.
By digital.
But I wouldn't mind being in Canton. I would have driven.
Yeah, come on.
It's great to be with three Midwesterners here.
Yeah.
Nothing like it.
Well, one other thing I want to bring up, and I'm pretty sure you were there, Michael, but in 1985, the record plant closed the 3rd Street studio, and they had a thing called the Last Jam. And at the time, I was living in Ohio, and I get a phone call out of the blue. How you doing? And it's Joe Walsh calling me saying, they're having this Last Jam at the record plant, and I've got your tickets. Meet Vitale at the airport in the morning. You're going out for the party. And I show up at the airport, see Joe, and we get on the plane and go to L.A. and go to directly to the record plant. I don't think we even had a hotel that weekend.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't remember.
And we went directly to the record plant, and there was all of the clients and all of the engineers from over the years. Ringo, Stevie Wonder, Keltner was there, all these people. And they had a jam in Studio C, and it lasted all night. And I think we went back to the airport in the morning and got on the plane and went back to Ohio.
Yeah.
And so that's about all I remember from that weekend, other than the fact that at one point there was like a reception line of all the guests, and people were walking by shaking hands with everybody and greeting everybody. And I had worked on Songs in the Key of Life with Stevie Wonder. So I walk up to Stevie and I said, Stevie, you may not remember me, but we used to play air hockey together. And Stevie looked at me and went, I never forget a face.
Hey, Bruce, was Calgren still living then?
No, he had passed away the summer before that.
That's what I know.
No. He
passed away in 1977.
Yeah, July of 1977.
77, right.
Part of the rite of passage as an assistant engineer at the record plant is to get the imprimatur, the stamp of approval from Gary Calgren by assisting him. That was like the final okay. And I had somehow evaded that because Gary was a perfectionist. I mean, Gary had a way of doing things, and you did it his way or the highway. I had somehow missed that thing because I kind of fell into engineering like within 3 months of landing at the record plant. So I was immediately engineering, and I wasn't assistant material. But in 1977, Wes Farrell, the producer, had said, hey, I want to do a disco album with this guy, Monty Rock III. And Calgren was Wes Farrell's right-hand man. Calgren was Wes Farrell's right-hand man. And lo and behold, after having engineering credits on all sorts of stuff, 7 or 8 albums with Zappa and blah, 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 he turns to the administrators at the record plant and say, I want Michael B., that guy, to assist me. And, come on. Nobody says no to Calgren. He's the owner of the studio. So that album was the last album that Gary engineered on. He died during the recording of that album. And I ended up having to. So basically, I got to work with him one time, and it was on that record. So it was July 21st, 1977. Is that right?
Okay, because before that, around 74 or 5, I think it was 74 something. I can't remember exactly, but we, Joe Walsh and I went up to the record plant in Sausalito. We worked in the room called The Pit.
Yeah.
And that was Gary Calgren was engineering. And that was when we did the Bill Wyman album.
Oh, right.
We did and that was Gary. And that was around, it had to be 74, at least 74, 75, somewhere in there. And that was a crazy record because we did half the album up in Sausalito. And then we came down to LA and finished the album at 3rd Street record plant. And that was a really fun project. There's a lot of, big names on it. But we had a good time though. Gary was a great engineer to work with. And I knew Gary for a long time, but that's the only record I made that he was actually engineering.
That's a great story.
That Monty Rock record, I assisted on a couple dates, probably when you weren't available, Michael. And I believe it was called Discotex and the Sexalettes.
Exactly.
Was the name of the band.
Exactly.
I love that. That's good.
Discotex. Yeah, with a picture of Monty Rock wearing this big white robe on the front.
Well, Drigo, you got any more questions for Michael or Joe?
I mean, you guys are kind of covering a lot of really cool, interesting stories and stuff. So, I mean, I don't know. I guess if there's anything that you guys want to kind of mention about either yourselves or what you're doing right now.
Yeah, that's a good idea. Well, Joe, I know
first.
Well, Joe, I
Go ahead,
know
Michael.
you.
Sorry. Go ahead, Michael.
Oh, I said, Joe, you go first.
Oh, I'll go first. Well, I'm working a lot. I'm doing a lot of sessions now, and when the Eagles get done, we may hit the road again with Joe. You never know. We don't never know how long they're going to stay out. And that's fine. And he loves working. Joe loves working. So we'll see what happens. I don't know. And in the meantime, I'm doing a whole bunch of sessions, and thank God, we're talking about technology. Thank God for the internet, because during all the COVID craziness, I was able to do a lot of sessions virtually, virtual sessions. And I was actually doing drum sessions, and I actually all of us have leaned on the internet during the COVID thing, and thank God for the internet, because I don't know, like 20, 30 years ago, if we'd have gotten hit with COVID, I don't know what, we'd all gone stir crazy, I think, with no connection to the world like the internet, And so, I'm just looking forward and praying for the day to get through this, because we're still in it. I know that we're not always having to wear masks and all the protocol that we were doing, but I hear about cases every day. We're still in it. We're not done with this stuff yet. So we got to be careful and got to be safe. And so I'm just looking forward to getting back to normal life, if that exists anymore.
Well, I know you did a rock and roll fantasy camp down in Hollywood, Florida.
Yeah, I've been doing a bunch of those. I did a regular rock camp and also a songwriters camp. I did with Desmond Child, who's written monster hits, and Steve Cropper was there, and Emmylou Harris, and it was fun. It was really fun, and we were going to have Felix Cavalieri, but his schedule didn't allow it. But I would have loved that, because I was a big Young Rascals fan, still am. And so we've been doing a couple of those, and we got a couple more coming up pretty soon. But I'm a road dog. I got to get back on the road. Well,
Michael, what have you got anything interesting on on the burner here?
Well, I sort of gravitated back when it got to the point where people were coming into the studio, the control room, and dropping off a floppy disk and saying, "Here's the tracks. I'll be back in a couple hours." That was sort of like, what? This isn't fun. But I'm so impressed with Joe, and I'm such a big fan of what he has done in his canon of work, and the fact that he's still doing it. I, however, gravitated back toward one of my first loves, which was metaphysics and healing. And before I left Los Angeles, I studied hypnotherapy at a hypnotherapy college in Glendale. And I spent 20 years. I moved back to Omaha and spent 20 years practicing hypnotherapy, and in a clinical setting with thousands of clients. Even the Nebraska basketball team flew me around the country, hypnotizing the team the year they won the NIT championship and the year following that. And I founded a nonprofit called heartlandhealing.com, where back in the mid 90s, late 90s, people didn't know as much about alternative therapies. And so the purpose of Heartland Healing was to inform people about alternative therapies, like, acupuncture and Reiki, energy healing, and so on. And hooked up with a lot of MDs here in the Midwest and around the country who practiced energy medicine, or at least incorporated that. And I've been writing a column for the local newspaper for 20 years on alternative therapies and so on.
That's cool. Wow.
So I totally, I have a little mixing board that I help out a nonprofit group with their Zoom broadcasts and webinars, but that's about as close as I get to audio anymore.
I have a record plant question for you.
Yeah.
Years ago, probably in the 70s, 74, I'm thinking, we went into studio. When was Studio D built?
Oh, that was not until about 77, maybe.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. My bad. Studio C.
Oh, Studio C was the last one finished. That was the big room in late 73.
Yeah, because in 74, we went in there with John Lennon and a whole bunch of people.
Oh, yeah.
And that was John Stronach who engineered. And my question is, what the heck happened to those tapes? Because maybe Yoko has them. Maybe they went to the estate.
You're probably talking about Jim Keltner's fan club, the Sunday night jams, right?
That's right. Yes. And I wonder what happened to those tapes.
That is the biggest question. I cannot even imagine where they are. Keltner would be probably the closest person to know.
But, yeah. But I'm thinking those, they still exist. I know, we lost John Stronach several years ago, but he was the engineer.
Right.
I remember that. And it was a lot of fun. And we recorded a whole bunch of stuff. It'd be fun to hear it sometime.
Oh, tell me about it. And also, the night of the last jam, Stronach was in Studio C control room recording you guys who were up on the stage in the large Studio C.
Right.
And I remember you and Ringo were drumming at the same time one time, and Joe was up on stage. But Stronach had reached his limit around about 3 o'clock. And Chris Stone, 3 a.m. And Chris Stone, I still call midnight noon. I just call it. No, I'll be there. But Chris Stone came and said, "Hey, man, Stronach's at the end. Can you jump in and engineer in Studio C the jam that was going on?" And so I was engineering you guys in Studio C with a couple assistants. And I would like to know what happened to those tapes.
Yeah.
Because that was all a record. That was all a record plant thing. That was not, that, and the same with the Jim Keltner fan club.
Well, you know what? I bet they'll surface someday. All of a sudden, they'll be out there. That'd be great.
Yeah. Keep your eyes peeled.
Yep.
Well, I know that there was a tape. There was one of those jams that Jagger was at.
Yeah,
And that
Right.
tape is out there called Too Many Cooks.
right,
Uh,
right.
I've seen that, but none from, like you said, Joe, the Lennon appearance or the last jam. I don't
Yeah,
remember
there was
how
Ronnie
it
Wood was there, all kinds of people.
You guys,
mean,
I
it
got to
was-
go let my dog out.
Well,
Oh, one last question for you, Joe. When are you writing this? You and Susie writing the sequel?
Oh, well, I need a couple more Joe Walsh tours.
I don't think
For
you
the
covered
material.
everything in that first one. And I got to tell you, I looked for it online today. And for any of you listeners, it's called Backstage Pass. And great stories, obviously. I found a copy for $125.
No. Here's what you're going to do. You're going to send me, you're going to text me or email me your address and you'll have one.
See, that's how you beg. That is how
No.
you beg.
We're really mad at those people that are selling them for that kind of price. We don't sell them for that kind of price, but you're not paying anything anyway. But no. Just I need an address and you'll get a book.
Hey, man, that's a nice offer.
And anybody else on this, not listeners, but I can't afford that.
It's kind of a dangerous.
Yeah. And let me just post your email address here for real quick.
No.
All right. Well, I want to thank you guys. Thank you for joining us on the Reel to Reel podcast from the Melrose Center. I'm your host, Bruce Hensal, joined by my co-host, Drigo. We'd like to thank our guests, Joe Vitale and Michael Braunstein.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you, Juju.
Thanks, you guys. Boys, great fun. Great fun.
Thanks, guys.
We have so much more in store coming up on future episodes. Make sure to like and subscribe on YouTube and your favorite podcasting app. Join us next month for another episode with another exclusive look at life behind the board in the music industry, featuring David Spiro. And thanks to Carol Hensel for our theme music.